This is the Pain, Suffering, and Happiness podcast. This podcast will help you to live fully. Pain and suffering are part of the beauty of life. Embrace pain, keep pushing, and be impactful one day at a time. Just know that yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery. All you have is now. In today's podcast, I'm going to talk about a disease that has haunted me for quite some time. This disease is called chronic migraine. Chronic migraine is a highly misunderstood disease, and what makes it more complex is the fact that the person who's sick looks quite good physically, whilst suffering from immense pain internally. So it becomes very difficult for people to comprehend this disease. It's easier if a person has got a broken leg or has got a wound from cancer, things that people can see. Chronic migraine is that difficult disease that people, very few people understand. It's almost like mental health. It's a disease that people don't even believe or understand. It's also seen as a form of weakness. This disease goes hand in hand with depression, and it has made me, for pretty much most of the time I've been suffering from it for years, unable to drive, unable to use a computer, unable to use a phone most of the time. And then also because it affects the nervous system, your brain, there's not really much you can do because the brain drives the body. So it really is a very bad disease that I feel I need to share my experience on with the rest of the world. With this disease, you cannot be able to do intellectual work. That is work that requires you to think deeply, analyze information, collate information, research. You don't have that mental capability to do that. And that is caused because of the variety of symptoms in this disease that I will go into in detail at a later stage. I have suffered from chronic migraine for a combined of approximately 6 years. Not necessarily continuous, and it's been continuous in the past 3 years, since December 2021. It's a very, very difficult disease. So I will try to explain this disease by sharing my personal experience, what I've experienced, how the disease has impacted me and those close to me, and the various challenges that I've had to be able to fight, to keep living and look after my family. So pain related to chronic migraine is in most of the time non-stop, and you just get some reprieve when you take your sleeping medication and you sleep. And when it's too severe, it overrides the sleeping medication, so you end up also not sleeping, sometimes for days, which has got a lot of ramifications. I will use this particular podcast to highlight the plight of people living with this disease, this dreaded disease. These people are normally ignored, misunderstood, both by doctors, insurance companies. It's quite a very painful experience that I'm going to be sharing, but I feel it's a disease that I need to talk about using my own personal experience. Chronic migraine affects approximately 12% of the global population, and usually migraine in broad, not necessarily chronic. affects 12% of the global population. So it's a lot of millions of people that suffer from migraine. Chronic migraine affects 1.3% of those people with migraines. So it's a very small proportion of people in the world. So it's not even 2%, it's not even 1.5, it's 1.3%. So no wonder it's a disease that highly misunderstood. Very few people suffer from it. I have never met a person who suffers from the condition that I'm suffering from, in the manner in which I'm suffering from it. It mainly affects women. Yeah, and it's also considered to be one of the top 20 disabling diseases in the world. So it's quite very bad disease, and people do end up unable to work, and because of the fact that you just don't get any form of medication to heal it. Then the other thing also that is important to note is that when do we call migraine chronic? That is when you've got headache for 15 or more days in a month. Then it is then categorized as chronic migraine. So the 1.3% I spoke about, those are the people that suffer from migraines for between 15 days and more. And I suffer from migraine for the whole year, and it has been happening since December 2021. There are a variety of symptoms for chronic migraine, and I have experienced all of them. The problem with the chronic migraine disease and why it's highly misunderstood, even including by doctors, is the fact that symptoms change all the time. I'll list a whole lot of symptoms, and part of these symptoms can appear and disappear, and others can emerge, making it very difficult also for a sick person to explain the disease, because they also don't understand how this disease is manifesting itself within themselves. So it's a complex disease, and you start to be labeled as someone who's confused if you're suffering from chronic migraine. You are also labeled sometimes as somebody who's trying to make up a story that doesn't exist. It's very painful and depressing. So part of the symptoms are dullness in your head, pressure, and this pressure, especially in my experience, is on top of your head. It's sometimes more frustrating than the pain itself, because pressure builds up on your brain and you feel like it can explode at any time. This makes it impossible to do anything, not even to have a conversation with someone. When migraine becomes chronic, in terms of my experience, you tend to spend most of your time alone, listening to the pain. Holding a conversation with someone becomes a job. So then you exclude yourself and you stay by yourself. And people think you're being negative, and you also don't want to talk to people. You also become short-tempered because of the pain. And you also become very abusive to the people around you because you are frustrated with life. You get angry and you start to ask yourself, why is this happening to me? Why not other people? Why I've done this small good or that good, and God has led me to a space where I have to suffer immensely. So it builds a lot of frustration. I'll do another talk where I focus on the psychology of sick people based on my experience. It's very difficult for people around you to look after you when you're in this particular situation of suffering from chronic migraine. One of the things also, which is the symptom, is nose bleeding. You bleed. That is caused because of the fact that what makes you have the migraine is the inflammation of the veins on the head. So some of the times you feel like your head is burning, it's on fire. And then your nervous system gets compromised and it starts sending pain signals when there's nothing happening, when it's not even necessary. and the pain will start moving from the head and sometimes spread throughout the whole body up to your toes or the bottom of your feet. The migraine also causes one-sided discomfort as one of the symptoms, and it can also lead to pain on one side of the head. In my case, I would experience a lot of pain from this side, and the pain will be very severe. You cannot like sunrise. When the sun rises, when the pills that you've taken for sleeping go off, you hate the day. You know the time to suffer has arrived, and you get very depressed. Going further, some of the symptoms of this disease include dizziness. It includes poor concentration, which is a very big problem. Poor forgetfulness, you get very forgetful. Loss of memory is a very big problem, and you're not able to think right. All these things that I've said, which affect the memory, make it impossible to be able to live and work. It gets very impossible to be productive in any form of life, even just running your own family affairs. The migraine can be bad to the point that when you walk, it's as if you are walking on your brains. So the only thing you do is you sleep, using medication, of course. When you wake up, you sit on your couch. Walking is an effort because it exacerbates the pain. So most of the time, you lie on your bed. So it's a form of imprisonment, because what happens is that you end up spending literally 365 days of your life in the house. And imprisonment by disease, I think it's even worse than imprisonment by, conducting any criminal case and staying in a prison facility. You don't know when the disease will go. And this may be the life you have to live for the rest of your life, with pain and suffering, which is pure hell. I hear a lot of people saying, no, in the Bible, there's a concept of hell. If you do this or that, you go to hell. For me, living with chronic migraine is practical hell, if not the real preparation for hell. It's a type of a disease that you don't wish on your enemy. So going further on the symptoms, the fact that your mind cannot work, you become functionally disabled. I'm a scientist, trained, well qualified. I cannot be able to review reports from scientists. I cannot be able to collate reports, things that I used to do before this disease became chronic in 2021. It's very painful when people start to think you don't want to work, or you want to be dependent on something, or even an insurance, whilst you have worked all your life. Continuing on the symptoms, one of the things that happens is that with chronic migraine in the night, you tend to be hot and sweaty. This happened for me for months without understanding, and I had to read a book to understand this disease. And I realized the sweating was basically the migraine causing it. I think that when the body is under severe pressure in terms of pain, it tries to regulate or control that particular pain, and then that makes the blood pressure to rise, and then with it also your body temperature also rises. It's trying to deal with this particular thing. So you get hot, sweaty, I'll be sweat in the night, like sweat to the point that I'm wet the whole body. And it was difficult to explain. I didn't understand what was happening until more than 2 years later, when a colleague of mine, a friend, brought me a book from Canada that explained the condition of chronic migraine. It also creates insomnia. Basically, it's sleeplessness. I've had days or weeks where in a week I'll sleep probably 2 days because of the pain. the pain will be very severe, and then I'll drink medication for sleep and it won't work. And then I'll just doze off maybe 2 hours, between maybe 6 and 8 in the morning, or 5 and 7 in the morning. I'll doze off. And that simply means I will always stay exhausted. The body is tired. It's a very debilitating disease. And further than that, it creates a lot of anxiety. Anxiety is one of the things that I don't wish on an enemy. You just become fearful. And when you hear the headache starting to, to increase in terms of the intensity of the pain, you start to panic and you tell yourself that problem has come again. I was unable to even go to a school event with my wife because of that. I will always be sitting in the house. It's a disease that is horrible, and all you wish as it worsens is to die. It's not really something that you want to bear or live longer with. I've read through groups on Facebook, there are people in various parts of the world who suffer from this disease. And the sad reality is that we don't think enough research is being done to find the cure or any type of medication that can help. So that is where the challenge is. The disease goes together with major depression. So once you have this disease, you will have serious mental problems. So I suffered from chronic migraine, and then together with that, it's major depressive disorder, which is basically a very intense amount of unhappiness. You cannot be happy at any point in time if your body is always in pain. It's impossible. You don't enjoy, and it's sad to spend probably almost 3 years of your life in which you don't remember a single day where you were happy. You cannot even go to the shops with the kids to enjoy ice cream because you are in pain. You're literally a slave of the disease. Continuing again on the issue of symptoms in relation to migraine, because of the unhappiness that develops over the time and the suffering endured due to the pain of the migraine, suicidal thoughts are very common and very frequent. One starts to see death as an escape route to the misery related to the disease. Some of the symptoms related to this disease include fainting, seizures, stroke sometimes, which is occasional, but there's constant pain. And in my case, that has been 24 hours. It will just vary in terms of intensity and the form of the symptoms. The symptoms will also change over time. The biggest problem with the treatments that one gets from general practitioners and hospitals here in South Africa is the issue of developing drug resistance. This relates basically to being given the wrong medication. In short, chronic migraine really is a life of pure hell, if not a primer to hell itself. In terms of medical treatments, I've gone to literally everywhere. I'll talk about doctors for now, but I've consulted anyone, priests, traditional healers, herbalists, literally anyone on this disease at a huge waste of money. So in this situation, you find that migraine is generally not properly diagnosed, and therefore it's not treated well. The biggest mistake that I've learned from this migraine is that doctors rely heavily on prescribing painkillers. And these can be over-the-counter painkillers such as Migraine, Panadol, and a whole lot of others, your paracetamols. So these painkillers, sometimes doctors do also prescribe opioids, such as Tramadol, and a whole lot of others. But once you consume these things frequently, without getting to understand the underlying causes of the migraine, it's almost like you're doing firefighting. At the same time, dousing the same fire with petrol. Because as the migraine worsens, you develop what we call rebound headache, which is basically also referred to medical overuse headache. That's when you drink the medication, it stops the headache for a few hours. Then the headache, once the medication wears off, it returns more severe than before. So that way you're not solving it, you're just worsening it. As the pain increases and the medication you use keeps worsening it due to rebound, your burgeoning demands for painkillers increases. And then once that happens, the doctors start to see you as a nuisance because they run out of ideas. All they can do is throw drugs at you. And if the drugs are not bringing any results, they will not be able to do anything for you. I've got a personal experience where a neurologist that was treating me for probably more than a year reached a stage where he refused to issue me with a script. And I spent, I think, 2-3 months in pain with no script to use or any medication, prescribed medication to use. And then he recommended a device called Nerivio, which is also a very expensive device. You got to use it for a month and you pay almost 3,000 rands. And I got it and used it for a few days, and then my migraine worsened. So you use this device, you have got medication you have to use for the depression related to the migraine, and then a whole host of things that cost quite a lot, draining almost all the family resources away. In terms of the treatment for migraine, we have got what we call preventative and abortive. So preventative is medication you must take when you sleep to prevent the migraine from attacking you. Abortive is the medication you take when you have a migraine attack. In all the specialists I consulted, general and neurologists here in South Africa, they do not seem to understand this language of getting the sick person or myself to experiment with preventative medication so that I don't just use the painkillers, which is basically firefighting without dealing with stopping the migraine from recurring. They will just give you, a whole lot of painkillers, heaps and heaps and heaps. At some point in time, I had boxes of painkillers that I just felt they were not really very helpful, at a huge cost, of course. And the sad reality also is that neurologists also here do not seem to understand the disease very well. I remember one neurologist saying to me that this is just a headache. It's a headache. There's not much we can do about it because it's not responding to anything. And the sad reality also is that the South African medical system is not as advanced as we think. The latest medication for chronic migraine is not even available. Ajovy, Acryptega, gabapentin, there's quite a whole lot of drugs that I've got to learn through interaction with people suffering from the same disease who are in the US, in the UK. I realize there's quite a lot of drugs. When you go to the doctors and try to tell them about these latest drugs, they will tell you they are not even here and they are not even registered. And one thing that I learned through a physician who helped me a little bit, called Dr Mpho, is that it seems some of our specialists here in South Africa are not really keeping abreast with the latest medication or technologies for particular diseases, and in this case, the chronic migraine. So South Africa is a bit left behind, but at the same time, other countries have advanced, and we also are getting, to pay a huge amount of money for treatment. I'll give an example. I've been talking to friends. Some of them went to Russia. And one of the friends told me that in Russia, he did an MRI scan for the whole body. It cost less than 30,000 rands. In South Africa, the same thing costs more than 20,000 rands. And you can see that it's basically, all to do with capitalism. I've also had people who had to travel from here to get treatment in Russia, and it will cost them less than sleeping in a hospital here for a week. It costs around almost 15,000 rands return during off-the season to go to Russia. I've learned something quite very interesting. People talk quite very bad about traditional systems. So, when you go to traditional healers for any form of consultation, say it's a very huge waste of money. I can say that my condition has been worsened by misdiagnosis, bad medication, and wrong tests that were done on me without any need. We must know that what Western medication does, which is the sad truth, is to treat symptoms and not heal any disease. And we have developed industries around these medical systems, that is hospitals, hospital chains, private hospital chains in South Africa that are flourishing. Then we also have pharmaceutical companies that obviously it is not in their interest for people to be healed. They are happy to be treating symptoms in perpetuity because they will make more profit. So in South Africa, we are stuck with an evil and to an extent racist capitalist system that feeds primarily on Africans because we don't own a thing, and I don't blame anyone for feeding on us. We have ourselves to blame. But these places, your hospitals, and the specialists you find in them, there's so much pursuit of money. I was so shocked. They are driven by money and not care for the sick. And it's common throughout all the hospitals that I've been through here in South Africa, in Gauteng in particular, Pretoria. And the other thing also is the issue that they are not afraid to do tests that are necessary. I had a test in January 2022, a lumbar puncture test, which I got to learn later on is quite very dangerous. If it goes wrong, I could have been crippled to the point of using a wheelchair. After it is known that the lumbar puncture causes headache, and I was there at the hospital because of migraine, and they did a procedure that adds headache. After the procedure, I couldn't bath, I couldn't do anything. My health worsened, and it has never become the same. And I got to learn from other people in the medical space that it was not really a necessary thing to do. this procedure is done when they can pick up symptoms of meningitis to try to detect maybe a meningitis is causing the migraine. But I had no symptoms at all of meningitis. Sadly, my life worsened and I went into in-depth darkness because of that. And up until today, I've not really recovered, but there's not really much I can do. If you are at a position of weakness, to even be able to fight, to claim for the loss that you have incurred and the suffering that you've incurred, including that of your children, and your family. What I also saw, in these hospitals is the fact that you will never get referred to a black specialist. It's a network of people amassing wealth for themselves in a particular race. And it's very sad to see this. And the majority of the people in these hospitals are black people, black middle class. The other thing also I saw, which is the evilness of this system, is the fact that despite having a good medical aid called Discovery, there's hardly a point in time I've been to hospital and not asked to pay a particular amount of money upfront or a co-payment, meaning that these insurances that we pay are of no use. And if there are people who are fighting the introduction of the NHI, it's basically those that are milking us, the black middle class, conducting all sorts of tests on us, making obscene profits in their own businesses, which are shared amongst the few, including our politicians, of course. Going further, I was shocked by insidious consultations that take place in the private hospitals. My neurologist will just talk to fellow colleagues who are looking for work opportunities to come talk to me. And the person will come and sit next to you. You are sick, in pain, and somebody is coming to ask you questions about, to conduct a psychometric assessment. These people, you don't ask to see them. They come there without your consent. And only when you leave the hospital, you realize you were having a consultation by seeing bills, which I found to be quite very bad, Why do things that the patient doesn't want? You also go to these hospitals, it's very rare that you'll come out without a debt. You will just receive statements showing that you owe this or that, but when you were there getting treatment, they don't come to you and tell you there's this amount of money that we don't have it covered. Can you pay it or not? If you can't, can you consent to owing us so that you are consenting to the debt? No, they don't do that. You'll just be followed by a debt when you're at home. I think they assume you've got a medical aid, you are part of the middle class, you will pay in anyway. And then if you don't pay, they've got a group of their own lawyers, of their own kind, their own kith and kin. They will pursue you to pay, otherwise they'll blacklist you. So it's a way in which they abuse the sick within our medical fraternity. No wonder our medical companies or groups, they are the best performing when it comes to profit. And this profit is made by abusing some of us. I've also noted that, for example, for my insurance, we have never been sickly people. They give us an allowance of 30,000 rands for consulting doctors and medication. And that allowance is exhausted before, the middle of the year. And you keep paying the insurance, the medical insurance, more money for less benefit. The medical insurance is made such that you are supposed to sleep in hospital. That's when they'll pay more. And I think they have a knowledge that people dislike spending days in hospital. We rather suffer in our own homes amongst our loved ones. So that's why the risk management is made such that you pay more money to them, they give you less benefit. When years pass by where you are not sick, it's a donation to the medical insurance. So they are wealthy people, and sadly they are not one of our own, and they will continue to screw us. I just wanted to give a context in terms of what happens medically when you go to this private hospital suffering from chronic migraine, and in desperation, because you do really get desperate. You are looking for a solution literally on a daily basis. Pain is the worst thing that you can ever have. You don't wish it even on your worst enemy. I've experienced that. There are things that one needs to avoid when suffering from chronic migraine. I think if possible, just try to keep yourself busy. I know it's very difficult to do anything productive with the pain, but you can just watch something, you can just try and talk to someone that you love, and where possible, force yourself to go out, because what leads to the collapse of the mind is sitting in the house for 24 hours and feeling useless. My wife has saved me by forcing me to go walk in botanical gardens with the pain. Embrace the pain. Do not fight it, because there's not much you can do about it. Avoid being very angry with life. I've been very angry with life. And avoid being angry with forces that you can't control. You can be angry at God about the unfairness of this life, but there's not much you can change. It will just increase your suffering, because immediately you want to see something as unfair, it will start to be painful and suffering starts. And that cycle is very difficult to get out from. Pain creates sadness, sadness creates stress, stress creates depression, depression creates pain. It's a very terrible cycle that's very difficult to break. You reach a stage where you don't know, do you control the pain or you control the depression? Which one do you start first? It's a dilemma that I don't want anybody to be in. Obviously, as much as possible, one must avoid stressing. And it's very easy to say, but you will stress. More so in the beginning when you can't work, you cannot generate income, you cannot contribute in terms of your intellect. You become useless. You have to be driven. Someone must cook for you, wash your clothes. You're almost like a disabled person who looks okay. I'm recording this in pain, but I've just started to realize it can be a small thing I can do to keep positive, even if it just means to talk about myself and share my experience with you. One thing also you need to avoid is to believe too much on doctors. Doctors are human beings. They will prescribe wrong medication to you, and that will make you suffer immensely. Rather, do some research whenever you get prescribed medication. Look at the medication. Is it addictive? Is it beneficial to you? Look at the combination of the medications that you're taking. It's very important. Just know also in that process of researching, you may end up being disliked by doctors, because doctors also don't want a patient who seems like they know more than them, because they are the ones who have been trained to be doctors. So it can be a little bit of a challenge. I want to give a quotation by Voltaire, who said, "Doctors put drugs of which they know little into bodies of which they know less, for diseases for which they know nothing at all." Voltaire is not necessarily saying we don't necessarily need to have doctors, but we must understand as human beings that our bodies are so complex to the point that doctors do not have the solutions for all our problems. And there are diseases like chronic migraine where there's just no solution, and you have to accept that and live with that. Otherwise, then you'll find yourself suicidal all the time. Doctors do not understand how the human body functions in its totality. Actually, one Indian mystic once said, "We still do not even understand a single cell in a human body, how it functions, because it does so much, billions of things that it does." So the human body is a complex thing. And the other thing we need to know is that for a person to be a specialist in a particular disease, it doesn't mean they've suffered the same disease themselves. That's why there will always be some form of misunderstanding, and them sometimes ridiculing you on your condition, because as much as the person has been treating people, they have not really suffered the disease themselves. And that's a serious disadvantage, because in my language, they say, it simply means the one who is sick is the one who knows how it feels. So doctors are hardworking, although some of them are working too hard to the point of chasing money with very minimal care for the patients. In all the time I've spent in private hospitals, I could say I could hardly speak to a doctor for an hour, even after sleeping in the hospital for a whole week. The only time I managed to speak to a doctor for more than an hour was at a public hospital in State Biko. You could sit, talk in detail, and the doctor will capture the information. And that's where you see the pursuit of money is not there. The problem there is that the system is slow. If you want to get a simple EEG test, you'll be told it will be done after 8 months. So it's not responsive to a person's condition. So you can deteriorate and die before you get the required treatment in a public hospital. So although we do have very good public hospitals, provided one can wait. So yeah, migraine is a frustrating disease, and doctors struggle to understand it also. I think they also don't like migraine patients, because a migraine patient will come with a list of symptoms, and then the other week the symptoms have changed into something else, and doctors will be confused, and the patient is equally confused, because the body is acting weird. You're not suffering from the same symptom all the time. So that's a little bit of a challenge. The other thing I've learned also, avoid taking too much medication. Less is more. Too much medication kills the body, because these are drugs. It's just they are formally approved drugs. So avoid the harm, and where possible, take less, or talk to the doctor to prescribe medication that can deal with a variety of symptoms at the same time, instead of prescribing a pill for every symptom that you raise. You end up with a bag of pills that you have to take on a daily basis. So heavy dosages are also a bit of a problem, because heavy dosages sometimes, those are the ones, in some cases, they make you so dizzy, you feel like you'll collapse. Then the dosages are not good. Doctors also who prescribe heavy dosages at a go. I once went to a hospital next to me here in July, and I got a prescription for some medication, and it was 500 milligram for one, 500 milligram for the other, 500 milligram for the other, 1,500 milligram to be taken by one person at a go, and with no thorough explanation. And I was told I must come back after 6 months to be checked. When I spoke to my physician, who's based in Canada, Dr Mpho, he told me the medication you're using is too strong. It will collapse your liver. You should be checked at a minimum at least every 3 months. You can imagine, what could have happened in 6 months. I will be dealing with the migraine at the same time then my liver is collapsing. So we must be careful of using drugs. This Western medication is drugs. If we can find other remedies, let's use them. The other thing also that we need to avoid, in desperation for sickness to deal with the migraine, we end up spending too much money. So I really feel like let's spend wisely. Let's take the medication that works. Some of the medication I drink, even myself, has no effect. It's just a placebo effect. You just tell yourself you have done something, and you tell the body that you have done something about the problem. That is where the challenge is. So the other serious problem is which I found in doctors. There is a tendency to prescribe medication without knowing the cost of it. There are generic products sometimes of medication that is being prescribed that is very affordable. It's important for doctors to prescribe medication that is affordable to the patient, that can do the same work. If you are a patient, when you go to the pharmacist, sometimes engage the pharmacist and say, do they have generic medication for the same type of prescriptions that you have been given? Rather save money, because I've realized you can spend all your money, but you will not reclaim your health. You will not reclaim your health. I would want to touch a little bit on the issue of sickness and life insurances, based on the experience I've had. It is important to note that our insurance industry in South Africa is run by, I would say, about racists. There's no big black-owned insurance company. So the working middle class in South Africa, they are propping up these racist insurance companies. And these companies, they work with their own panel of specialists that happen to come from particular races. I can vouch that in those panels, they will have very few black people. We are always excluded in these spaces, but I don't blame them, because we have to form our own organizations and our own businesses to look after ourselves. So if you are sick with chronic migraine, just know that you're going to run into serious problems. Chronic migraine is highly misunderstood, like I've already indicated. Ill-treated, is not treated, mistreated by specialists. Whereas you also have specialists that are struggling to write reports to explain your condition, with the situation where you are having symptoms that just keep changing all the time. So with chronic migraine, you're almost literally on your own. There is no support system. And in South Africa, there's not really any strong research either on the disease. I just heard that in Russia, they have a center of neurology. That's where I wanted to travel to, because my insurance that I paid for almost 19 years is making it difficult for me to be paid. So the other thing that these insurance companies do is they will send the wrong people to assess your disease or your condition to determine if they can pay you or not. I've had people being sent to me who are psychometrists and psychologists to assess me on a condition that has got obviously some psychological effects, but it's basically seriously neurological. It's a dysfunction of the brain, pain causing the brain not to work. And none of the people that they brought to look at me were neurologists. And you ask yourself, why? And one thing that I've also realized when I was talking to other people is that these people that are sent to assess you, they are of a particular race. And we know what some of these people in this particular races do. I've heard a story of someone who was sitting in a committee doing assessments in an insurance company. Two people with the same degree, disease, one white, one black. The white person was paid without being questioned, was given the sick benefit, and the black person suffering from the same disease was told, no, he can work. He's faking the disease. He can be able to be productive. Must go and look for a job. And this is the experience that I've had. And I'm happy that it has made me to capture this form of suffering to share with everyone all over the world. Insurances will make sure they don't want to pay you. And if they pay you, it will not be at a time where it will help you much. It's either your disease will worsen over the time. You are in pain, you are suffering, you cannot meet your monthly obligations. You join this insurance so that it will give you a sickness benefit so that you can meet your own needs. If you have a house, you can pay for a house and pay for a car. I've put a claim for one of my insurances that has started in December last year. And now this is October, mid-October, and we're still pretty much having it not fully finalized. And obviously my house is at risk, and then my car is at risk, and I struggle to pay for the fees for my two children, whilst I have an insurance that I've paid for 19 years. So be very cautious with insurances. That's what I'm trying to say. More so when it comes to chronic migraine, because they will not understand the disease. They will send you to people who don't understand the disease. You will be laughed at, you will be ridiculed, you will be treated in a very painful way. That's the experience I've had at the hands of some of the racist assessors that I've come across. Finally, I think it's important to look at chronic migraine and deal with it in a holistical way. This disease, it needs solutions that are both physical, keeping a little bit active in terms of the body, psychological, trying to keep motivated. So you need to engage a psychologist that you pay almost once a week to keep you going, listen to you. We need to also have some mental and emotional and spiritual approach. If there are people who can pray for you to cope, that also can also add up into something good. Things such as meditation also help to cope with pain and the feeling of being useless. Breathing exercises, I've learned they help a lot with anxiety. And we need to see something positive. I don't know how, if you're in pain around the clock. It's very hard. It's also hard for me talking to you, looking at this camera and feeling the pain, going against the pain. But I think let's just have an impression that we can carry our pain for a day and keep moving one day at a time. One thing that I've also learned, you can also write a book on yourself. Life is lived once. Writing a book on yourself doesn't require a lot of concentration. With pain, you can write a few sentences a day. That way, you can say you are contributing to humanity. In case you die, you can leave something behind. That's one thing that I found to be very motivating. Draw on your support system, be it your family or your church people. Unfortunately, on my case, I got neglected by my family, my immediate family, and the only person who had to bear the brunt for my disease has been my wife and my children. None of the people I was born with from the same family came to see me in the past 3 years in darkness, in pain and in suffering. Some even went as far as spreading the rumor that I was dead. So I've learned to accept that family is the people that I have, even if there are 2 or 3. A friend of mine from Canada called Dr Mpho told me during this disease that if you are in a hard situation and very sick, and you happen to have 5 people that care about you, consider yourself very lucky. I was neglected by close friends that I supported in business. Some, when they lost their close loved ones, I went there and made a lot of efforts to assist them. But when I was sick, even a friend who stayed just across the street didn't come to visit me, didn't even send me a WhatsApp message. So I know the frustrations of being sick with chronic migraine. I know the frustration of having to explain to my wife what I'm going through all the time and realizing that she doesn't comprehend it. And that's the nature of the disease. Chronic migraine is very hard to understand because you will be looking okay from the outside, but you are in pain around the clock. So what if the people that saw you every day are struggling to comprehend the disease? What will happen to those that are outside, even the doctors? One thing that I've learned is that out of anger and the depression and the inability to do anything and being imprisoned in the house by this disease, you get very negative. And this negativity affects the people who are trying to give you the support system. And I've seen people who are very close to me age very fast because of the sickness that I've had. Chronic migraine is not a child's play. I'm making this video basically to talk on behalf of all those other people who are suffering from the same condition. It's not an easy thing to come out and do this type of recordings where you get vulnerable and you expose things happening within your family. But I feel there's a reason why God led me to this disease. There's a feeling that I can do something about it by talking about the disease, as long as I'm still alive. There are moments when this disease was so severe where I accepted and prayed for my own death, and it didn't happen. So now, in doing this video, I'm trying to find meaning, and I'm still gonna do other videos just to talk about suffering. This podcast about suffering and pain is gonna capture other things around my life, but I'll also capture other things that I've seen people suffering about. Suffering is something that people don't want to talk about. Pain is not something that people want to talk about. Death is not what people want to talk about. One thing that is important when suffering from this migraine or any other disease is to use resources wisely. Funds run out when you keep paying this or that specialist or this healer or that healer. Rather use resources wisely. But it's easier said. As the pain worsens and the disease becomes non-stop, you get frustrated and you move literally every second, third day to another doctor, because you are searching for a solution. So it's important to avoid consulting too much, be it with doctors or traditional healers or priests or prophets. Sometimes just sit down, and absorb the disease and make friends with the disease. One other thing also is to control diet. Diet can also be very critical in chronic migraine, especially your coffee can fool you. Some days I will drink a cup of coffee and feel better, but when the headache returns a few hours later, it's more severe. Sugary drinks are not good. Sweet things are also not good. Some nuts are not good. So you have to determine which food worsens the migraine. It's not the same for everyone, and that's what makes it complicated. One other thing also is to eat good food. Leafy greens, your spinach, your cabbages, your kale, less meat. It's also very important. But the key thing that I learned, which took me 3 years of suffering to learn, is to accept that one cannot heal. It's important to learn that and live with the pain. And embracing the pain, making pain your friend, is quite very important. It's also very important to know that no matter how far you believe in God and how prayerful you can be, you are not immune to pain and suffering. I have slept on mountains, on top of rocks, with snakes, in caves for quite a lot of time. But I found myself in a deep, dark hole of sickness with this disease called chronic migraine, accompanied with its fellow called major depressive disorder. The two are enough to be called hell. I would like to quote Deepak Chopra in his book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. He said, blame no one, including yourself, for your own pain and suffering. Things are the way they are supposed to be. That's it. You can't change it. Just know also that prayer may not necessarily be the panacea. It may not make the chronic migraine go away, but it can keep you going, can give you a positive spirit. It's a deep, dark space of pain and suffering and uselessness. It's the type of space where you don't want your enemy to enter because it's pure hell. It is important amidst this suffering from chronic migraine that you create moments of happiness, whatever that may be. Maybe you can be happy to see your grandson, your granddaughter. That can bring some moment of happiness. Maybe somebody can just go and buy your ice cream. That can also be something that can bring that single moment of happiness, even if it's just for a minute. The suffering is intense, and any window of opportunity to be happy, it must be used. It can be celebrating a birthday for your child. That will give you a sense of being contributing to your family, because the disease renders you useless and dependable. It makes you immobile. It captures you within your house. Your house becomes your prison. The other thing also is just look for whatever inspires you. If you love music, try and listen to some music. Walks in the park despite the pain can be very helpful. Nature is healing. Nature heals. I've learned it from myself. Whenever my wife sees that now I'm worse and I can do anything to my life, she will insist on taking me for a walk with the pain. And we will walk with the pain. The other thing is we need to accept things as they are, because this condition, if your brain is not functioning, there's nothing you can do. You can't plan for your life, you can't run a business, and you cannot perform at work. Acceptance of the situation is very important. You will lose your job, you will lose your business deals or projects. I've done the same myself. You will not have a salary, sometimes for months, and you'll start to struggle to pay things that you used to be able to pay: accommodation, buy yourself food, insurances for your cars. You will also lose friends and family. People will just get away. People don't want to invest in a dying horse. That's not how social capital works. You can also be divorced. I'm lucky that my wife has kept with me through thick and thin. It's just that I feel pained to see those people that are close to me and I love going through a lot of suffering, which I am not sure when will it come to an end. And I don't have a solution in terms of reducing their pain and suffering, which relates to my condition. It is important as a sick person to find a community of the sick. I have found a community of the sick on Facebook, and I have gone there to ask a lot of questions, and I found people answering within a short space of time. And that helped me to understand my situation of chronic migraine. I learned also there are people who are disabled because of the disease, who are on grants in the United States, in the UK, who cannot do anything for themselves. It's not a good thing. We all are proud people. I didn't go to school and study and have 5 degrees and travel the world, garner so much experience, only to sit on a chair for 24 hours and not be able to generate money. It also pains me to see people like insurances thinking that I'm pretending whilst I've been going in and out of hospital for many months. It's so inconsiderate and evil. The disease called chronic migraine is evil enough to deal with. And it's terrible that you have lost close friends and family, and you think the insurance also can help sort you out so that at least you can have a life going forward, and they add to the misery and the disintegration of your mental health, and ultimately, obviously, leading to your own demise. This is the Pain, Suffering, and Happiness podcast. This podcast will help you to live fully. Pain and suffering form the beauty of life. Embrace the pain. Keep pushing one day at a time. Yesterday is a history. Tomorrow is a mystery. All you have is now.